We're on the 12 o'clock hour, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off here. Hello to all of those attending. My name is Julie Heaton. I'm director of the Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. Today, you're in the right place if you are joining a webinar about public service loan forgiveness. We really appreciate you all tuning in. If you're new to this webinar series, the Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center is a free personal finance resource for the Penn State community. Joining me also today are Sarah Alvarado-Metzger and Sarah DeWolf, who are assistant directors in our center, along with Susan Bogart, who is the director of financial aid at Penn State Law. Correct, Susan?
Penn State Law, Penn State Dickinson Law. It's all
Penn
good.
State Dickinson Law. And we're sort of the collective team that is going to be with you as we navigate the thrilling and sometimes frustrating world of public service loan forgiveness. So I'm going to give a little bit of a preamble here that's different than some of our other webinars because this topic is highly complex and we want to make sure that you have what you need to navigate this in the next hour, but also in the next few months and for the rest of your time seeking loan forgiveness. So we're going to flip the script and give you some resources right off the bat. So if you can only come to 15 minutes of this webinar, you're not sort of lost looking around for resources. So our goal today is to, one, address the public service loan forgiveness basics, give you those details so that you understand what this program looks like at its core. After that, we're going to hand the reins over to Susan, and she is going to get into some of the challenges and changes that have been happening over the last few years, last few days, last few months. And we are going to have a long time to sit down and answer questions with you if needed. So let me fire off a couple of resources and walk you through them right now. So the first one in the chat that I'm sending is the studentaid.gov/PSLF website. This is your go-to resource to find out as current as possible information about public service loan forgiveness. Studentaid.gov, you should be familiar with as well. This is the Federal Department of Education's website for student aid. Also in that link, in those links, is our YouTube channel. If this is a recording that you want to watch in its entirety again or send to someone else, it'll pop up there in the next few days and you can rewatch, get the information you need, fast forward through the bits you don't need to hear again, send it to a friend. Also our website, financialliteracy.psu. This is where you can reach out for more, look for more resources, self-study modules on PSLF. You can also, if you need to, and we'll talk more about this later, but if you need to schedule an appointment to meet with one of our professional staff to look at your loans, and you're in some of the situations that will prompt you to do that, then that is also where you would find the email to reach out as well. Also our webinar schedule for upcoming events surrounding loan repayment, loan forgiveness, that we do this every semester in some form or fashion. And finally, the last link is to sign up for our listserv. We send out updates on that listserv about events, but also occasionally we're sending updates about loan forgiveness processes there. It's a great way to stay in touch. We're going to launch into the webinar now that the resources are all shared with you. Some housekeeping on the webinar. We have disabled the chat function today in order to streamline our question and answer portion. We don't usually do this, but because there's so many questions, we need to kind of organize them around loan forgiveness. If you click Q&A, that will take you to the small question box and you can enter your questions there and those get answered. You're also more easily able to view other people's questions to see if someone's asking a question similar to yours. So can't use the chat today, but we do really want to hear from you. And we've got 3 of us answering questions at any given time. So send us your questions at any point and we will get to them either immediately in text or answer them verbally at the end. All right, I don't think I missed anything. So we're going to go to the next slide. I'm going to give us some framework before we dive into PSLF basics, Public Service Loan Forgiveness. You'll hear us use that acronym quite a bit. So Public Service Loan Forgiveness is a loan forgiveness program, one of several for federal student loans. On the screen, we're listing all of the loan forgiveness programs just to make sure that we're really clear. We're talking about one loan forgiveness program offered through the Department of Education and attached to some federal loans. Perkins loan, teacher loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment forgiveness, and then health service core forgiveness. These are separate types of loan forgiveness. If you have questions about those or you think you're eligible, I would highly recommend shooting us an email or booking an appointment if you think you're eligible for those, because these are different programs and they don't always play nice with public service loan forgiveness. So it's important to know all of your options, but for the sake of this webinar today, we're zooming in on just public service loan forgiveness. For more information on these programs, we recommend you go to studentaid.gov and search for these programs, or to the National Institute of Health to look for some of the programs for healthcare providers. And now I think we're going to hand this over to Sarah Metzger, who's going to give us the basics of public service loan forgiveness. As you're listening, think about your eligibility in each of these areas, and remember that although there's a lot in the news about this right now, public service loan forgiveness is attached to federal direct loans and is available to those who already have existing loans out through the direct loan program. So she's walking us through just the standard base of what this program entails and its eligibility.
Okay.
Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Julie. All right, gang, let's open this book up. So here are the PSLF basics. To receive forgiveness, you must make 120 qualifying monthly bill payments on your federal direct student loans. And while you're making those payments on your direct loans, you must be in a qualifying repayment plan and working full-time for a qualifying employer. You must also be, you'll see this in the top right corner, you must also be employed by a qualifying employer when you apply for and are granted forgiveness, which makes sense since this is a program meant to benefit public servants after all. So these key areas of eligibility, they all overlap and the rules are firm. So for example, let's say you're on a qualifying repayment plan and you're making your monthly bill payments on time on those direct loans that you have, but you aren't working for a qualifying employer, those payments are not going to be eligible for PSLF, and they're not going to count towards the 120 qualifying payments needed to receive loan forgiveness through public service loan forgiveness. So that said, it's really important that you monitor that you're meeting each of these areas of eligibility at the same time, and we're going to look more closely at each. And I am going to remind you, and I think maybe Julie could share it one more time because we had some new folks join in on the call. Going to studentaid.gov is going to be your source for all of this information again and in more detail. Okay, we're just repeating what we are provided by the Department of Ed, so this isn't new information. Let's dive deeper first into these qualifying payments. I mentioned on the last slide, you have to make 120 of them in order to be eligible for PSLF. So the question is, what makes the payment quote unquote qualifying? They are, of course, going to be on time, monthly payments made in full. They could also be multiple partial payments in 1 month, but those payments are going to count just as one. So if you're making like multiple 3, 4, 5 payments in a month, it's going to be considered just one payment. And any payment is going to need to be received within 15 days of the due date. It is important to note here that payments made when not required are not going to count toward the 120 payments needed for public service loan forgiveness. For example, if you log into your loan servicer and you make 30 payments in the span of a week, you can't say that you suddenly made 30 out of the 120, but you can make lump sum payments. So you can pay ahead on your loans up to 120, I'm sorry, up to 12 months. Sorry, not 120. We'd all have forgiveness and this webinar wouldn't be necessary. You can pay ahead lump sum payment up to 12 months. Okay. And those can be qualifying payments for PSLF. If you've been in AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps or the Department of Defense, DoD, there are some exceptions that apply to this. So if you were in a military deferment or Peace Corps deferment, or you've paid ahead on your loans, those are slightly trickier situations. You're going to probably want to consult with our team just to be sure if those payments are likely to count. In most cases, they will, but like I said, those are sometimes trickier situations to navigate. So feel free to be in touch if that particular situation applies to you. But this is what those monthly payments look like in a nutshell. Pretty straightforward. Let's move on to the loan element here. So direct loans are the only loans that qualify for PSLF. They've been issued since the 90s, and they include, like you see on the screen here, direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, direct parent and grad plus loans, as well as any other direct consolidated loans. I want you to note the asterisks attached to the direct parent plus loans. So if you look at the bottom of the eligible loans list, you see an asterisk right next to parent plus loans. These loans aren't directly eligible for PSLF, but they can qualify if you take really specific steps, which Susan will explain in a later slide. So more on that, hold tight on the call. In terms of ineligible loans, FFEL and Perkins loans are not eligible for PSLF. That's just part of the normal rules. And I know we've got a mixed audience. There are folks in this call that are going to have a combination of these loans that you see on the screen. And it's important that you log into studentaid.gov, take a look at your dashboard and confirm the types of loans that you have. Again, studentaid.gov, go right back to that. That is your main source for everything. Now let's pop over to qualifying repayment plans. What do we need to understand here? Each of these 120 qualifying payments that you make toward PSLF must be made while in qualifying repayment plans. The plans that you see on the screen do qualify under normal PSLF rules. So when you leave school, you will be automatically enrolled in the standard plan unless you pick a different plan. Now, the hang up here with this standard plan that we have listed first is that it's a 10-year standard plan. And in 10 years, with 12 months in each year, you're going to make 120 months of payment, which, as you know, is what you need for PSLF. So you're going to get to a point where if you're in the standard plan for the entire period of repayment, you're going to get to your 120th payment and go, woohoo, forgiveness, but actually your balance is now down to zero because it's a 10-year plan. You'll have paid off your loan debt in full. So the standard plan is not the best plan to be in terms of maximizing forgiveness. But if you have been in the standard plan making payments and all other criteria are being met, those payments will still count. So it's not like you're losing out on those payments that you made while in the standard plan. Okay. The takeaway is you're going to want to be in what we call one of the income driven plans, IDR. Save, pay, IBR, ICR, these are all income-driven plans. And these are plans that are going to base your monthly payment on somewhere between 10 to 20% of your discretionary income and are generally going to significantly lower your monthly payment, thus increasing the amount that you'd have forgiven at the end of 120 months of payment. If you were in the standard plan at any point, again, like remember, you're good. If all the other criteria are met, you're going to get those payments to count. You're probably going to want to make a switch if you're not in one of these IDR income-driven plans. Normally, typically, you can switch into save or pay, IBR, ICR. You could do that at any time, but that's not currently the case. Another thing that Susan is going to elaborate more on, you see another asterisk on my screen. There's more to understand about what kind of changes you can make to your repayment plans. But under all normal circumstances, these are the plans that qualify. The bottom four are going to be the income-driven plans that will help you maximize the amount of loans that you have forgiven at the end of your 120 payments. Okay, so please do keep that in mind and monitor that you are in a qualifying plan and that you are being strategic to maximize how much you have forgiven at the end. Now let's move on to qualifying employment. As I mentioned earlier, and I'm so excited to hopefully have public servants in the call, all Penn State workers qualify. If you work for Penn State, it is a qualifying employer. This program, PSLF, is meant for public servants. And these are any kind of folks who work at a 501c3 tax status nonprofit organization, or any level of government. So that includes tribal, state, local, federal. I kind of went in a funny order, but any level of government is going to qualify as an employer for you as well. It can include some volunteer organizations like AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, as well as military service. So I want you to think about, if you've been in the workforce for a little while, which of your past employers are going to qualify you for that element of employment, and where you were making payments at that time, who were you employed with, things like that. And another note to make here, though, because especially as we look at like federal employees or state employees, like if you're a contract worker, so like if you are working for the government, but you're like a third party contractor doing work within a government building or for a government office or for government programs, that is not going to qualify you. So it really matters who is paying your paycheck. That is how you're going to, one way to help determine if your employer qualifies. We'll talk more about how you can be sure in just a moment. But some more on what qualifies. I said in an earlier slide, you must be working full time. What exactly is full time? Well, it's going to be whatever is defined by your employer, or at least 30 hours per week, whatever is greater. So for this program, you need to be working at least 30 hours. And the cool thing is, if you work for a couple of different organizations, so let's say you're part-time at one and part-time at the other, and both employers qualify, as long as you collectively work at least 30 hours a week, you are going to be able to qualify that employment and qualify your payments made while working for those employers to count towards PSLF. So you can kind of patchwork this together if that's what your work situation looks like. Okay. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to mention, there's a lot with employment here. I want to mention that qualifying employment does not need to be consecutive months or years. So if there's a gap that you've taken due to unemployment, or employment in the private sector, you've stepped out to raise a family or whatever it may be, that's okay. You're not going to get credit for months of payment made when you're not working for a qualifying employer, but the count picks right back up when you re-enter the workforce for a qualifying employer. So you don't have to start over from zero, which is really good news if you do need to take a break, or if you are going through a period of unemployment, of course. If I missed anything, Julie or Susan, let me know, but I'm pretty sure I covered it all. There's a lot on employment. The slide doesn't look like it's got a lot of info, but there is a lot to consider for a qualifying employer. Now, onto this help tool. I think most of us are going to be able to determine if our employer qualifies, because it's pretty obvious if we work for a 501c3 or level of government. We know we're not a contractor. But to be absolutely sure, it's important that you use the PSLF help tool online. This allows you to search for qualifying employers, so you can go back in your resume and look for all the different places you've worked and see if those employers qualify. It's also going to give you information on what actions you need to take to become eligible for PSLF if you're not already. And very helpfully, or most fortunately, it generates the PSLF form for you and will submit it to the employer for employment verification as well in many cases. So it's a handy dandy tool that's been around, I think, since 2018. Anybody pre-2018 probably was, got annoyed with having to fill out the paperwork each year. This tool helps make things easier, keep things streamlined, and cut down on paper waste for sure. So please check out that tool. You're going to find it directly at studentaid.gov/PSLF. That's one of the links that Julie initially shared at the start of our session today. So please, please, please do tap into it. If you work here at Penn State, please use that PSLF help tool as well to certify your employment and get the ball rolling on tracking your PSLF qualifying payments, as well as your obviously qualifying employment as well. So that's the first step. Use that help tool. Make sure you're meeting the basic requirements. Make sure you're in a qualifying repayment plan. Make sure that your loans qualify, make sure that your employer qualifies, make sure that you're making those On-time monthly payments in full for the balance due. You can do lump sum payments, plan that out if need be. Just get strategic and check in every year on your progress towards PSLF. So we say in this third box, certify your employment annually. That's an excellent thing to do. Make it part of your regular routine every summer, every spring, every whatever works for you on your calendar. You want to make sure that you are keeping track of these payment counts and that every year you have 12 more added to your total on the way to 120. You're going to be able to cross-reference on studentaid.gov your progress. Previously, MOHELA was the loan servicer managing public service loan forgiveness. So you would see your progress on the MOHELA website. That's no longer the case. You will see everything, all the trackers and counts moving upward on studentaid.gov. So very easy now. We don't have to give you a ton of links to different places. It's all on studentaid.gov. To be sure that you are filling out the correct paper form, if you so choose to, it looks like this. It's multiple pages long, but you actually only need the first two to submit and verify your employment, and then have your payments calculated with the Department of Ed. The first two pages will need to be filled out, some by you and some by your employer. Make sure you're using the correct version of this form. We finally have an updated version that is good through 2026. You're going to want to note your personal information. If you're sending snail mail, withhold your social security number till the end when you go to submit to the Department of Ed. You don't necessarily want that really sensitive personal information floating around until you're ready to make the final submission. But you're going to plug in employer information here. You're going to plug in whether you were full-time, part-time, and average hours worked. And then at the bottom, your supervisor, your HR rep, for my friends in public school teaching, your principal could sign this, or the HR person could sign this. You just need to get the official's name, title, signature, email, that kind of information, and then resubmit back to the Department of Ed if you choose to use the snail mail version. But we highly encourage you all to use the help tool instead, because it saves on paper and it makes things really streamlined and automated. Okay, but it will include that information on where to mail to if you do prefer snail mail. Definitely send it certified so you can get a tracking number to make sure it arrives.
Sarah, I'm going to jump in real quick just because we have a couple of questions that I think are really important to clarify while we're on this page.
Let's do it.
Well, first of all, use the help tool. It will automatically send your information to the employer that you list, and you don't have to deal with mailing it, things like that. But some folks are asking about full-time employment. 30 hours is what you need for the program. If your employer says that full-time is 40 hours, that doesn't matter. 30 hours is what you need. So as long as the employer in their section is saying that you work 30 hours or more, or you're combining it with another job simultaneously and you get up to that 30 hours, it will count. So you just put in your part of the employment section, send section 4 and 5 to the employer, they fill it out, right? And they're going to put, so like Penn State, for example, they have you listed as a certain FTE status. And so if that's above 30 hours, doesn't matter if they're selecting that you're full-time or part-time, they're really just looking at number of hours worked. Second thing to follow up with that is appointments that are not for all 12 months. This really comes down to how your employer fills this out. Some employers are just going to mark your entire years of service it really is not up to you. You're not filling this out. So they're going to mark how long you've been employed. And so for a place like Penn State, where there's a lot of 9 months appointments, if they're denoting every sort of period of employment you've had, then you might only see for an entire year, 9 months of payments counting, right? But if they fill it out as though you've been consecutively employed, then that's going to show, then you'll have employments for that entire period of time covered. So really that's between kind of you and your employer and how the employer fills out section 4. And I really encourage you to let them fill it out, because if you fill it out for them and then they get it, they're just going to change it, right? So communicate with your employer to get those answers. But these are some of those things that are important to note, that like you're not ineligible just because they're saying you're part-time, as long as you have 30 hours.
There is also a box to check if your employer cannot be contacted because the org is no longer open. So please don't also panic if you have you worked for an org that's no longer in business. That doesn't necessarily mean you won't get credit. There's just some different steps you need to take to verify. Thanks, Julie. Good clarification. All right. Please keep those questions coming. I'm going to turn it over to Susan, though. We're waiting on bated breath for Susan to tell us more about these special considerations, some of the asterisks that I talked about, and then what the latest is. Susan, if it's helpful, I can give you remote control, and then you can click
awesome.
through the animations because I know each line will come up one by one.
Excellent. Or maybe I don't know how.
No, you got it. Go ahead and click. It'll pop up.
Okay.
We're all laughing around here, not because we think it's funny, just to be clear. It is entertaining maybe to watch the constant changes, but
Oh, yes.
certainly for people in our role, we are just, we
It's
find
like,
some dark humor in it.
yeah, what
Yes,
else can you do but laugh
What
sometimes?
If we
else?
don't laugh, we will end up crying.
Right.
Yes.
Buckle
So-
up, you're on a ride.
Yes.
Mhm.
Stay on the ride.
Yes. So as Sarah mentioned, the Department of Education is now managing the PSLF program. So if you log into your account at studentaid.gov, you'll be able to see there your payment count, and you can watch that count down to your 120 qualifying payments. It's not a bad idea to take screenshots so you have documentation of that. And you may even want to download an entire history of your student aid data file. And I know that there's a way to do that. I don't have details on how to do that, but Sarah DeWolf may jump in at a later time. And but yeah, it's always good to have documentation of where you've been as things are in interesting times. And then there's the save plan. This has been caught up in court for a very long time. Anybody who was in the save plan before this got caught up in court is still considered in the save plan, but you've been on an interest-free forbearance for a very long time, and I expect that to continue for at least a few months. If you are trying to sign up for SAVE, you may have been placed in a processing forbearance and then into the SAVE plan. The processing forbearance is not interest-free, but the SAVE forbearance is interest-free. So whether or not you're accruing interest depends not only on what type of loans you have, but on what type of forbearance you've been placed in. You're not receiving credit for public service loan forgiveness payments or lack of payments that are happening during this forbearance period. But for those of you who may be close to your 120 payments and this forbearance is stopping you from getting those last few payments in, there is an option called the PSLF buyback. And the way this will work, going back. Okay, we'll get back to that. The buyback program, you will have to use the PSLF help tool to request PSLF reconsideration. And that will prompt the Department of Education to say, okay, yes, you are eligible for this, and they'll send you this buyback agreement along with a bill for the amount due for the payments that you're trying to make count. And you submit that buyback agreement along with your payment for the forbearance months that you're trying to make count. And then you could get to your 120 and get your forgiveness without having to wait for the courts to figure this all out. It's clear as mud, right? I see a question. Do we expect the PSLF buyback to continue for the foreseeable future? I do expect that to continue for the foreseeable future, so you can get to your 120. And okay, so let's talk about Parent Plus loans. In their own form, Parent Plus loans are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Also, in their own form, other types of federal student loans, such as FELP loans or Perkins loans, are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. You can, however, make them eligible by doing a student loan consolidation. This consolidation, what it does is takes all of your existing federal loans that you choose to include and combines them into one big consolidation loan, which then makes it a direct loan, which would be eligible for forgiveness. But with the Parent Plus loan, there's another hoop that you have to jump through. A consolidation loan that contains a Parent Plus loan cannot be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. But if you reconsolidate that consolidation loan, that new consolidation loan does not have a Parent Plus loan in it. It just has a consolidation loan in it. And that double consolidation loophole can make that Parent Plus loan eligible. Isn't this fun? Okay. And then there's the thing that has happened in the last week. The income-driven repayment application is currently not available and not expected to be available for at least 3 months. The SAFE plan has been caught up in court, and when a recent decision about the SAFE plan came down from the courts, that somehow managed to catch up the pay-as-you-earn plan and the income contingent repayment plan into similar questionability. So right now, you cannot apply for an income-driven payment plan. Income-based repayment is not caught up in this same issue, but income-based repayment was on the same form as all of the other income-driven payment plans. So while this is all getting sorted out in the courts, you cannot apply currently for an income-driven payment plan. They've taken down the online application, they have taken down the paper application, so it's simply not available. Also, the online consolidation loan application is not available, but the paper one is still out there if you wanted to consolidate your loans. I have no concerns at this time about the future of the income-based repayment plan, but things are interesting. We are definitely living in interesting times, and this is kind of fluid. I'm getting new information every few days, it seems. And I'll take it back to Julie to guide us through any further questions.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. You know, there's a lot of anxiety around this program, and it's really warranted that, or really fair that you feel anxiety if you're worried about this. I do want to iterate what Susan just said, that like frustrations, changes all aside, if you have current direct loans that you've taken out, public service loan forgiveness is attached to these loans and to that promissory note that you signed. And so although there's concerns about the future of this program existing, or there's changes that are made of things that were added later to the program, the basics of the program are still the same and are very much still available. Right? There are some things that need to be worked out about, like, for example, the IDR plans, but there is indication for hopefulness around those things. And also the basics of the program are still intact because they were enacted legislation that made them so. So just wanted to reiterate that. All right, keep your questions coming. They're really good. A lot of this stuff, we get into the minutia a bit because it's so specific to you and your situation. So let's go to the next slide. Susan, do you want to take on these limiting?
Oh, sure. Sure. If you want to talk to somebody at the center, please make an appointment to do that. They have some limited availability to talk with faculty and staff for Penn State about this program. So they may have to make some priorities for employees whose loan situations are more unique than others, or for those who have Parent Plus loans. But the Finlit Center can definitely help you. You can email them and set up an appointment. They can answer questions by email. I can answer questions by email. I'm always happy to do that. And also, my colleagues at the Access Lex Institute have a free phone line, which is available for all borrowers if you have a quick question and just want to reach somebody on the phone and ask for help. Access Lex can help you with that too. They are very well versed in this program.
It's important to note here that we really want to prioritize folks who have specific situations, right? So if you have just general questions, make sure you exhaust our resources that are available online that offer sort of general questions. But if you have a situation like you need to consolidate a loan, it's definitely worth sitting down and chatting with one of our staff about this, reaching out via email. The other thing I will say is that you can reach out to student aid or to student aid. They might not get back to you in a timely fashion. So everything that we explain is going to be information that you can find on student aid. But it just is not, they're pretty backlogged right now. All right. So we have good job, everyone. We really got through that with plenty of time to answer some of these questions. Please stick around. We will stop the recording at this point, but just want to make sure that you know that resources are available to the Penn State community, and there are a lot of free resources online, both through our center and other organizations that are helping folks navigate this. Here's some of the resources available to the Penn State community, faculty, staff, students, and alumni. Feel free to scan the QR code as well to get to our website and learn more. In the chat is the email that you can reach out to if you have questions or need to sit down with someone about public service loan forgiveness.